what does WPA3 bring to the table? Of course, it's about security, and what does it improve in terms of security? One of the first things that we learned is that it's gonna secure open networks. WPA2 is 14 years old now, and when it was standardized, I'm sorry, and when it was standardized, there were of course open networks, but they weren't as pervasive as they are today at airports, schools, hospitals, right? So, and it was not too much thought on how to secure these open networks. So of course, with HTTPS, you can protect your communication, but that doesn't protect you from, you know, a malicious user to see what sites you visit. So WPA3 is promising to solve that with individual data encryption. And of course, that will require that both the access point and any client support this protocol. Most likely for existing access points and hardware that's out there, we'll see manufacturers providing firmware upgrades that will make them compatible with WPA3. Now, what else is in the table for WPA3? Brute force attacks. Many of you remember that I think in November of 2017, there was a big vulnerability that became public on WPA2 networks. That was the crack vulnerability. Was quickly solved by security experts, and that encryption method uses a four-way handshaking. Now, WPA3 is promising to introduce a new handshake protocol, so it won't be vulnerable to brute force attacks anymore. And one way to do that, it will be to block connections that try too many times to connect with a specific password, right? If you fail above a certain threshold of tries to connect to a network, that's going to be detected, flagged as an abnormal behavior, and it will be shut down. Of course, this also solves the problem of users using quick passwords. And you cannot trust the users, as you know, is in most cases the weakest link to use a proper password for their Wi-Fi credentials, or actually any type of credentials. The third improvement is going to be for IoT devices. Of course, again, the IT industry, the number of devices has exploded in the last decade. Not something that was taken into consideration in WPA2. And if any of you have used any IoT device that doesn't have a screen or a keyboard, you know that it's a bit difficult to configure credentials without those peripherals. Or you may be able to use some kind of a smartphone application that communicates with the IoT, maybe over Bluetooth, until you install the credentials on it. Now, WPA3 is promising to solve that problem, to simplify inputting Wi-Fi credentials on IoT devices. We don't know how this will work. They keep it a secret. They haven't released many details around that, but we're looking forward to learning more about it. And the last thing is 192-bit security. This is mostly targeted towards government, defense, safety critical industries. Like let's think about hospitals. Let's think about let's say energy companies that require higher security standards for Wi-Fi. So this coming up, WPA3. I'm not sure why they don't introduce that kind of security for all connection at WPA3. Maybe there is a cost to pay in terms of performance and encryption, CPU clock cycles that is needed to do that high of an encryption bit number. But in certain industries, of course, people are willing to pay the cost to have better security, and WPA3 gives that option. So yeah, to summarize, WPA3 is introducing, of course, better security for open networks, security from brute force attacks, easier way to configure credentials on IoT devices without keyboard and screen, and finally 192-bit security for as an option for certain industries. Thank you so much for the attention, and have a nice weekend. Bye.